And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur and a health educator by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomena I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, interaction, and communication gap that exists between fitness professionals and our medical community. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest, most evidence-based, and most engaging information in the health sciences. And to do that in episode 101, I'm joined by Francis Neric. Francis is the Associate Vice President for Certification and Credentialing at the American College of Sport Medicine. But in the context of this conversation, we're going to be talking to Francis in his role as the president of CREP. CREP is the Coalition for the Registry of Exercise Professionals. And this professional registry is one of the most important legs to the stool of the professionalization effort that's ongoing in our industry. Essentially, the professionalization effort to transition fitness professionals onto the healthcare continuum as qualified healthcare providers. In this episode, we're going to unpack the different legs of that stool a little further, talk about the role that CREP plays, and most importantly, talk about where the profession is going in the next 5, 10, 15 years. This is an incredibly exciting time as we sit here kind of on the doorstep of the professionalization effort in our industry. Stakeholders are talking together, plans are being put in place, and progress is being made. And that's really what this conversation with Francis is all about. Any additional information we'd like to share with you from today's episode can be found on the show notes page. That's by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 101. Please enjoy this conversation with Francis Neric. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Francis Neric. Francis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
So this is going to be an exciting topic. Francis and I have, connected on this topic for, the past couple of years. And we were just talking before we came on the air about how exciting of a time period this is for the professionalization effort that's happening in our industry, which we're going to get into today with regard to the role CREP is playing and some of the other things that are happening. But before we get into that, why don't you just give our audience a little bit of an idea of your background to provide some context for the discussion?
Sure. My name is Francis Neric. I have my undergrad is in exercise science from the University of California. Sorry, just kidding. It's the Cal State Long Beach. In my exercise science, my master's degree is from Cal State Fullerton. And I have my MBA from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. I've been in this industry for about 15, 16 years or so. I started my work at the National Strength and Conditioning Association, kind of worked my way from an exam preparation to exam development, kind of overseeing their education programs as a education project manager. And then I transitioned over to the American College of Sports Medicine about 6 years ago. I've been working on overseeing their certification portfolio and really kind of expanded it from just certifications to specialty credentials and kind of like specialized training, and really expanding our online education portfolio. And have been really involved with our organization and outreach efforts in conjunction with Monty Ward, who's our government relations person. So really spending a lot of time in really kind of pushing the industry to kind of set the benchmark of what we considered minimally competent, and doing a lot of that work. So super excited to continue this conversation here.
Yeah, and we've had many conversations around this, and it's a very exciting time in the industry. We are coming together, and I think a lot of people really sense that. And we're going to get into that, I think, broadly speaking, but I do want to keep this conversation somewhat focused around CREP, because I think of CREP as one of the best kept secrets in our industry that is so critically important, and it needn't be a secret anymore, particularly if we're going to move this in a positive direction. So first, tell everyone a little bit about CREP and then why its mission is so important to our professionalization effort.
Yeah, it is so CREP is our mission is to position exercise professionals as part of the healthcare continuum. I think that's one of this kind of a simple version of it. But really for their unique qualities that they have in their education, training, and experience to really kind of set the bar of like, how do you prepare for the workforce? How do you determine that they're competent? How do they continue to grow as a professional and also remain competent over time? And then the last part is, where do you find them in terms of from employers or other stakeholders? Where do you find those professionals? I think that's the big thing that CREP does. So the CREP stands for the Coalition for the Registration of Exercise Professionals. A lot of folks really know us for our registration, the U.S. Registry of Exercise Professionals. So that's really kind of the product line that we offer at the Coalition. The intention is really to make it a one-stop shop to identify who the exercise professionals are, where they're located, and positively verify their certifications. So that's kind of like what the U.S. registry does.
Mm-hmm.
And the intention for the registration is really to kind of be consistent with the way healthcare professionals do things. If you look at nurses, you look at physical therapy, you look at athletic trainers, and you look at other just kind of licensed professions, they have the registration as a benchmark of like, here's who's supposed to be in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the role that's there. We do that with a number of NCCA accredited organizations, but it's certainly open to ISO 17024 accredited organizations as well. The American Council on Exercise is on there, and American College of Sports Medicine is on there. Now, Strength and Conditioning Association, the College Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association is on there, NCPPT is on there, NCSF is on there, and there's a number of other organizations, including the American College of Sports Medicine, are all in that organization that really believe in that same mission of, you have to have an accredited certification to be at least minimally competent. You have to have an organization that supports those professionals and believe in the vision that there is a continuum of professionals that will support the industry moving ahead. And really, professionalism is really underscoring professionalism is kind of where when we think about U.S. reps and kind of CREP, that's what we're really focused on is, if we wanted to be a part of healthcare, if you wanted to be as strength conditioning, you're wanting to have those professionals as uniquely qualified on the team that support athletes, you have to professionalize the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that when we're thinking about kind of our role, that's what we're trying to push ahead, especially when you're trying to meet with lawmakers and healthcare, et cetera. You have to set the benchmark of, we are professionals in the industry. This is not a hobby. These are our careers, and this is where we're focused on towards the horizon.
Yeah, so important. Not a hobby, because I think that's how a lot of external stakeholders have viewed our industry for some time. Now, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because it is a slightly different discussion, but there are some other elements to the professionalization effort that are critical. Certainly, the registry is a very important part of it. But from your perspective, what are some of the other legs to that stool of the professionalization effort?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I think when we're thinking about it, it's being a thought leader in the space. I think when you're thinking about combining multiple things, I think that's one of the big things. I think in the last year or two, I think what we're getting really excited about is really connecting things together. I think that's really kind of the legs of the stool. So on one hand, when we're talking about education, certainly anybody can get the education that you want, but I think especially when you're working with advanced training, or if you're working in the clinical populations, the education that you learn at the university needs to tie directly to the exercise profession, right? So that's not broad education. It really has, when you think about the education that you're getting in school, what you're learning from a didactic perspective, just like you're learning in your lectures, but the practical application of it also has to happen too. Yeah. You have to have that hands-on training in addition to what you're learning, the knowledge that you're learning in the classroom. Tying those together to a specific job is really important. So from our perspective, I think that's a really key component. Switching hats to the American College of Sports Medicine, that's why our board moved that direction. When we're looking at for setting the bar at 2027, that you have to come from an accredited program. that program, an exercise science program, is preparing you specifically for the job as an exercise physiologist or a clinical exercise physiologist, and they also have to include the practical experiences there. It's funny is just like it's when it's not accredited, exercise science can go multiple different ways. And so at the end of the day, the employer isn't really sure exactly who that person is when they graduate, because there's not a consistent way the person trains. So when we're thinking about that from an exercise science side, or you apply that to, say, like the healthcare industry, if every nursing school taught completely differently, it would be chaotic.
Yeah.
If I'm a physician trying to hire a nurse, if every nursing school did whatever they wanted and whatever they researched and how they prepared, and then at the end you're like, I'm trying to hire a registered nurse, you would have no idea what you're getting.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's like, well, if there's a clinical exercise physiologist job, what are you learning in the classroom? What are the experiences you get then to get to the point where you are hireable and you're in an integral member of a healthcare team? You have to line those up together. So I think that's one. And so we work with the Committee on Accreditation for Exercise Science, who's a committee under CAHEP. CAHEP just kind of does like healthcare education, and tying those pieces together. How did you prepare in school? Tying it to a certification which is independent, which is for our exams at ACSM. It's an independent assessment of competency. Like regardless of what institution you went to, how do you know this person's competent? And tying those pieces together. And then the other part of when talking about like certifications, really the component is just like, it's how do I remain competent over time? Because now that you're out of school, how do I ensure that they still keep up with the standards? And then the registration component is like, where do you find them? All of those pieces need to link together in order to kind of support the industry. I think that's one. It's just like knowing who we are and being able to explain that very simply. And registration combines all of it.
Yeah.
So when we talk about it's hard to say, oh gosh, when I'm thinking about 15 years ago, we would always say NCCA accredited certifications. That's the benchmark. But when we start talking to lawmakers or we start talking to healthcare, explaining each one of those takes like, oh gosh, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And it's just like you lose them.
Yeah.
And so talking about registered professionals, which includes these four components, they're like, oh, okay, I get that. Because that's similar to healthcare, or that's similar to something else. And so they're like, it really is able to, especially for the industry, kind of set the bar, like reduce the amount of anxiety that's there, of understanding like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm getting. So, you're a professional industry. Okay, let's talk. I think that's one of the key components of tying those pieces together, and just using. I think for us, it's being able to use the like terms is really simplified, and simplifying the language has really been helpful. Education, certification, continuing competence, and registration is really, you're going to start hearing us talking about like that. Really is kind of like where we're moving towards is registered professionals are the minimum bar of, if you want to be a professional, you're registered as a professional. And registration that we have at US reps is similar to the registrations already established in adjacent health occupations.
Yeah. And when you use the nursing analogy, it makes all the sense in the world. No one for a second thinks that it would be appropriate from a healthcare perspective for every nursing school in the country to have a different curriculum, but that's right now how it is structured in exercise science. And so it's that in and of itself makes this an exciting time.
Oh yeah. I think there's parts of it when we think about like, and I guess it's like for a lot of our stakeholders are going to be faculty members too.
Yeah.
So the one component that I want to really emphasize is we would always say accredited universities before versus non-accredited universities. So you're comparing, I don't know, University of Michigan to, I don't know, Mike's University of Fitness, right? So when we're saying, oh, that's a non-accredited program that's not unworthy, what you're really saying is when you talk about accredited universities, that's regionally accredited, which means for the public if I send my child to a university and that my child goes there to say University of Michigan. If they change their mind 15 times, it's 15 different majors, the university can still support them. They're adequately supported financially. They can switch majors whenever they want. It is, as a parent, I can go, oh, okay, they're not going to just fold up shop. My money's gone. It is saying that this institution can adequately prepare my child and support my child. The version that we're talking about is programmatic accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about that exercise science program, if my child goes into an exercise science program, there's a job that they're preparing them for. The student, when they come in, is just like, okay, so you're going to teach me, and I'm going to provide the experiences that I need in order to be adequately prepared for this particular job, right? So as you're transitioning in that position, you're given those knowledge, experiences, and that tools in your toolbox to go, look, I am prepared. I'm ready to hit the ground running. As a exercise physiologist, strength coach, clinical exercise physiologist, a trainer, I'm able to do the job. And that's really a key differentiator. Like, oh, we talked about accreditation for the whole time. It's like, yes and no. There's accreditation means something different for everything that you do. And it's really a third party verification tool. Is just like, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? But for us, when we think about it, professionalized industry, it's like you're protecting the public. Mm-hmm. That's the intention when you talk about accreditation and registration. Why that's important, you're protecting the public first and foremost, and that's really a really key component of it too. So we kind of went a little sideways.
That's great, but
it's going to tie that.
Yeah, no, it's an important distinction, and I think one other thing that we have to talk about before we get into some of the recent kind of wins that CREP has had is another critically important thing that very few people know about. And I've actually heard you refer to it as the most important document in our profession, which is the National Exercise Referral Framework. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that. And that's something we'll link up to on the show notes page because everyone needs to look at this document, but educate us a little bit on what is called the NERF, not the football, not the football.
That's right. So this has been a vision for the coalition for about 15 years. In Ireland, they saw physical activity as an opportunity to really impact nationwide health. Mm-hmm. For the biggest impact for the cheapest amount is getting people moving. I think that's, if you're trying to simplify that. But we understand that when we're thinking about all the diseases and the conditions that are out there, there's a lot of risk involved. Mm-hmm. Right. So there are parts of it where there's nuanced parts, like where if I have cancer, I like exercise oncology. Exercise helps cancer survivorship. That's an example of one. Mm-hmm. If I have obesity, there's certain things. Diabetes, there's certain things. You have to understand, I think, two things. One of them, what is the risk that they have, the comorbidities that they have? What is the risk for this person in getting active? And then the reward of, okay, can I reduce the liability of this person? Can I reduce kind of like the cost of those things? Now, the higher the risk the person, the more education, training, experience that they would need to have, right? So there are parts of it where when we think about kind of like the National Exercise Referral Framework, when you think about kind of like a pyramid, the higher you go, the more that you're considered quote unquote safe. Mm-hmm. Now, for example, having a master's degree in clinical exercise physiology puts you kind of towards the top of that pyramid within the exercise science space. But here's the problem. If there's 14 million people and you only have 300 people that can deliver the service, now you run into a major problem. Yeah. So while the framework really made sense of like, look, the more education you have, the better. And then you have lots of people that need your help. Now you're going to have a scale problem. Yeah. So the framework that they did in Ireland was absolutely wonderful. Understanding how physical activity really can help benefit people on a mass scale. I think that's one. How do you unify the exercise professionals and get the healthcare to the exercise professionals? I think that's another thing that's component. It's just like, and then cycling back to healthcare. So this is a preventative model
Mm-hmm.
versus like a reactionary model, right? So healthcare comes in, they screen the person. How can you bet? Are you in a disease or condition state that could benefit from exercise? Yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
And then get them to the right program, right? So an exercise program delivered by qualified people. And then the last part is just like as soon as that program is done, cycling them back into healthcare. Because, how do we work together as an efficient team? The problem that happened there was just like there wasn't enough people to be in within that kind of in that framework. There was the idea was phenomenal. The execution was a little tough. And so that's really kind of driving CREP now is taking that framework that we did in Ireland, and we'll link it to, I guess, in your podcast, the National Exercise Service Framework, and then kind of Americanifying it a little bit. So when we're thinking about the millions of people in the United States, do you have enough professionals to do it? In the backdrop of that is the American Medical Association. They have a called the triple aim. So it's cost, quality, and access. Right. So can you do this is the impact of physical activity, is it cost effective? I think just like reducing costs and the professionals who are delivering those, is it cost effective using the top of their certification, right? So I think that's one. So quality, how can you ensure that these professionals who are delivering programs, effective programs, can be done consistently, right? So wherever you go, a program is being delivered, it's consistently done. And then the access is, do you have enough people? How do you have that? And that really is just like looking at healthcare or access professionals as a continuum, right? So you have to, I think that's the big key difference that we have in what we're looking for is just like, look, at the highest level of supervision where the physician has to be present, you're going to have to work with somebody with a master's degree in clinical exercise physiology with advanced certifications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and lots and experience to be able to work at the highest level of your credential, right? At a moderate level where it's physician recommended, when we're thinking about that component, it's really like, okay, so if I go through a health screening in athletics, right? So I have to, if I'm going to be working at a very high level physically, my doctor has to screen me. Am I safe enough to do that? Or like, you're not active enough. You need to work with a professional. And so to make sure that they have enough education that's there. If you're broadly healthy, and you have lower risk, or you're just getting started and you have lower risk, then you can work with those with less education, right? So, but they're certainly qualified because they've passed the standardized exam, right? So it allows you to stepwise into the numbers of professionals that we have. And so within the U.S. registry right now is a little over 100. It's right around 168,000 professionals. So when we think about those 168,000 professionals that are supporting our healthcare, our folks that are out there, there's a lot of professionals that are out there that can help. And so depending on the need of the healthcare or the public, you have enough professionals to support the industry. So I think there's certainly I think that's the big component. And that's really driving us now is just like it's tying those together. One of the major wins from the Physical Activity Alliance, and really the Physical Activity Alliance and US reps work together a lot. Physical Activity Alliance has a lot of folks that work on that, including some of the exercise professional registrations are on there. I'm sorry, the societies are on there. I think it's one. You have payers, and then you also have technology folks, and then you also have adjacent health occupations all working together. One of the major wins that they had is adding physical activity as a vital sign, or physical activity as a health measure. So with the PAA into HL7, don't need to kind of go into that. HL7, what that does is it is a framework, or it's a way to have databases interact together in healthcare. Now, what's phenomenal by adding physical activity as a health measure, it really goes back to, okay, so if I'm going to refer them, who am I referring them to? US reps, the US Registry of Exercise Professionals is the intermediary of like, okay, if you're in healthcare and this person can benefit from physical activity, I'm referring them to somebody who is on the registration.
Yeah.
That is a huge step because the referral never happened before.
Yep.
So when we're thinking about US reps and I'm sorry, the coalition and the NERF, that's how we're tying those pieces together. The coalition's really focused on who are the qualified professionals. HL7 is just like in healthcare, and the work that we're doing with the Physical Activity Alliance of the healthcare is just like, here's if you can benefit from exercise, who are we sending you to?
Yeah.
And that's the merging together. Or to me, is that's so exciting to see because that's never happened before, and you have to work together in order to do that. It's not any one single organization can't do it by itself. You have to work as a coalition. You have to work hand in hand with healthcare, and and recognize that we are uniquely qualified as exercise professionals. And healthcare is like, look, yes, you have the training and experience to help somebody, stay healthy, but we work together as an efficient team. That's the part that's just so exciting to see. And that here's the thing: you have to trust each other.
Mm.
And that, I will say, is when we're thinking about the next few years, 3 to 5 years. One was we're focused on, do you understand who we are?
Mm-hmm.
The next 3 to 5 years, we got to prove you can trust us. I think that is going to be the toughest part, because as soon as you lose trust, is game over.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you build that sense of trust? I think that's going to be, the component that just being able to stay like professionalism is one, and you got to stay tight with the messaging and kind of who we are, what we do, how we're uniquely qualified. And you have to go, look, the standard is here. If you're not meeting it, I'm sorry, you're not going to be a part of this model, right? And so work together in order to get us to where we need to go. And we cannot break that sense of trust in healthcare, because if we do break it, it's game over.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, this does come back to trust on so many levels, and the collaborative work that's being done is so exciting. And I wish we could actually get into a more nuanced conversation of all that the HL7 work that's happening, because it's fascinating, but it also makes my head feel like it's going to explode sometimes. It gets so technical. Before we kind of bring this to a close, CREP just released its 2023 impact report here in the beginning of the summer. Can you hit on some of the wins that CREP has had, recently that were mentioned in this report?
Yeah, so a couple things. I think there's things that we've done and things that were going on the horizon, right? So the first one, I think, major win is that US reps and the coalition has really worked with ICSM, which is the Intercollegiate Sports Medicine Group, with NCAA, with the NATA. We worked with the NCAA, and then our association worked together to really put the recommendations of what at a minimum, what do you need to be able to be a safe strength and conditioning coach? Because this is in the backdrop of some really high really some really unfortunate deaths that have happened at in the strength and conditioning profession in the universities. I think there's been 80 deaths per year of athletes who are considered the healthiest individuals. And when we think about that, it's just like, what are those recommendations in order to keep those professionals safe? And so we provided a number of recommendations, which includes the education that has to be in exercise science, I think, is one. You have to have the right certification. You have to have continuing education. You have to have the specific training in athlete safety, et cetera. There's probably about 7 recommendations that we pushed out. And they accepted it because the key component of it is just like, because we work as a coalition.
Yeah.
It's not one organization, it's multiple organizations. NSCA, NCSF was on there, and CSCCA worked together under the coalition banner to put these recommendations together in collaboration with other organizations. That's key, is that we work together to come up with those recommendations, and those were accepted by the NCAA. In July, those are going to be implemented. So in order to continue to be a strength coach, you have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And meet those requirements. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to work in that industry, right? So I think this making sure that you remain competent as the professional that's there. That was a major win. The second one is that CREP was recognized with Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, which is Department of Health and Human Services. And really, that's a recognition that CREP is a premier thought leader in our efforts to improve health outcomes. I think that's a one major one. It's just like as we're continuing to push the industry of professionalism, we're recognized by HHS is huge. The third one is a physical activity as a health measure, which we just talked about, and then the National Exercise Referral Framework is driving us now. Is tying those pieces together and actually writing out technically how this would actually work is really is what we're working on now and actively working on it. Looking ahead in the impact report, and we'll link it to here too, Mike. It's high school athlete safety is a big component. So building on the win that we had with the NCAA, how can we then go to high schools? Because there are more deaths. I think there's 3 times as many deaths that are happening in high schools than they are at the universities. So when you're running kids through a conditioning program, how do you know that they have the right training? Do parents know that there's things that, if I'm running really high level strength conditioning programs, it could be run by a janitor.
Yeah.
Right. So these people are just folks like they look fit, safe enough. If I knew that, if I was like knowing what I know now, and my oldest daughter's in track and field, and they're running through conditioning programs with little to no training, and you're having them lift heavy barbells over their head with little to no training and not understanding like how like the safety works, I feel very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I worked as a lifeguard back in the day, there was trainings that we would do all the time in emergency acts procedures. How do you work effectively as a team? Like there's trainings that you need to be able to do to work effectively to get there. For us, high schools that are just as like a Wild West, when it comes to conditioning folks, we are sitting there going like, that is a huge opportunity for us to make it impactful, to be impactful there too, of like getting qualified professionals into those facilities, and whether it's the training up of the staff that you already have to go through the same process to be considered up through a registration. How can you do that? But then also those who are strength conditioning professionals, there's a job opportunity that's there too. Like if you're going to hire somebody to oversee these programs or run the programs, there are folks that are certified as strength coaches they're qualified to do this. So those are components that are there. And I think the last part, being able to continue to underscore collaboration. You have to work together. And I think that's the building collaborations is one, and that's within our own industry, but really collaboration across industries, like interdisciplinary collaboration is going to be huge. And the big one is after that is like really kind of establishing and maintaining trust. I think between all those things, I think that's really big things for us.
And it's just, it is such an exciting time because you could just feel the momentum building. This is a topic I think you and I could talk on for hours, but we're going to be respectful of our audience's time. Yeah. So where can people go if they want to find out more about CREPs? Where can you point them?
Yeah, so great questions. You can find us on usreps.org. So usreps.org. You can find us there. Twitter, we're on there as well. Our more active is probably on LinkedIn. So you can see all the stuff that we're up to when we keep up with the news that we have on, when we launch our impact report, read about us, see the work that we're doing. We are kind of like, we do a lot of organizational outreach for multiple organizations. So that's keeping your ear to the street of kind of where the industry is going. And our goal really for me as the president of the coalition now is taking those things and then communicating it out. And I think that's the big thing for me is just being able to go, there's a lot of things that are out there. It's super complex. My goal as president now we've kind of established it, is helping people understand what those components are, and then being the voice and champion for our professionals that are out there. So usreps.org is one place. You can find us on Twitter and LinkedIn and really join the conversation. We push out a lot of the stuff when we have on webinars. And also it's like a lot of the panel discussions and really kind of making less like I think less formal, and so people can just like talk more freely. I think it's just been very helpful too. So you can put a face behind it, and just really kind of understand where people are coming from, and really kind of making folks helping folks understand where our industry is going, what we're doing to support it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will link up to all those on the show notes page. And again, I strongly encourage everyone to connect and share the information, because you said it. It's, collaboration is the key. Well, Francis, before we bring this to a close, this is actually a question that I've been interested to ask you for a long time, but I just haven't had you on the podcast. So it's the question I always end the podcast on. And I think we've hit on so many things today. I'm curious how you land the plane on this one. But, I consider this wellness paradox to be the trust, interaction, and communication gap that has existed between fitness professionals and our medical community. This is literally our entire conversation today.
Yeah.
If you could distill all of this down into, one piece of advice to give the fitness professionals that are listening as to how to close off that gap, what would it be?
Oh man, I think it's just being able, to me, if closing the gap. I think when you're doing it, and it really kind of goes back to registration. I think is that gap, because I think that's when I first got here in 2017. I think there's a couple things that kind of led me to kind of registration is really kind of the key. A lot of it is because it distills a lot of the way I would consider prepared to do it. So I think it's just like, and then using like to like terms. I think that's kind of like, I guess, a simple version of it. But I will say that I guess it's like if you're going to press me on how to answer it, I think it's programs over people. That when, and I think we did a survey at ACSM of our physicians, and I think it's just like, and there was like really kind of 3 survey questions. It's a really elegant survey, which really kind of like captured, I think, a lot of what we see in the industry. One is, what is your level of trust as a physician to refer to specifically an exercise professional who has education, training, experience? About 50%, which is kind of scary. We're like going, oh my gosh, what the heck?
Yeah.
And then it's, what is your level of trust that you have of referring to a facility that is run by qualified professionals, which I kind of described? About 50%. The third one was, what is your trust to send them to a program that has measurable outcomes, key performance indicators of improving health, wellness, etc.? Nearly 100%. So I think that, to me, if you're going to bridge the gap between both, it's the effective programs to set the level of trust between the program that you're delivering and connecting it to healthcare. Because if you can adjust that and go, okay, look, we're running a cardiac rehab program, a pulmonary rehab program, diabetes prevention program, exercise oncology program, the program that is shown to have efficacy in the research, and is improving health and well-being and reducing costs, that program is really the key. Now, in order to run an efficacious program that reduces risk, it has to be delivered by qualified people. That, to me, if you're gonna connect the two, is what needs to happen. And so it's working with this really kind of ties in the research that we see at the universities that are happening, working with the employer sector and healthcare, and being able to connect them all together. So this is the education, the training, the experience, everything else. Effective programs, I think, is our way in. And so I think that, to me, there are a number of tentacles that come out of it, of those effective programs. But for the Coalition for the Registration of Exercise Professionals, you have to get minimally qualified. You have to be registered in order to be a part of that, because we cannot break that trust. And therefore, you have to meet these other components that deliver these types of programs that can show those KPIs that healthcare needs and the way they need it. I think that's our way ahead. I know that was kind of like it started off as just the registration, but really to me, I think it's if you're bridging that gap, it's effective programs.
I could not agree more. Well said. Francis Neric, thank you so much for joining us. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Francis as much as I did. If you found it insightful or informative, please share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares make a huge difference for us. Any information we'd like to share with you from today's episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 101. Please be on the lookout for our next episode when it drops in 2 weeks. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until we chat again next, please be well.